Jun-ho's office towered over the city, glass and steel reflecting the crisp, ordered world he had built around himself. Inside, everything had its place. He was the CEO of one of Seoul's fastest-growing tech companies, known for brilliance and ruthlessness in equal measure. Emotion was a word he considered unnecessary, and most employees had long since learned not to approach him casually. The day Amara stepped into his office building, her presence seemed to ripple across that structured world. She was unlike anyone he had ever encountered, tall, graceful, with a vibrant energy that seemed to challenge his very air of control. She carried herself with confidence, her eyes scanning the office with curiosity, as if she could see the rhythm of life hidden beneath the polished surface. As she approached the reception, Jun-ho's personal assistant nudged him quietly. "The consultant is here," she said, her voice hesitant. Jun-ho barely looked up. "Send her to the conference room. I will meet her there." Amara entered the conference room with a polite smile, unaware of the storm she had stepped into. Papers were neatly stacked, computers hummed in perfect rhythm, and at the head of the table sat Jun-ho, expression unreadable. "Miss Amara, welcome," he said, voice calm yet commanding. "I expect efficiency, punctuality, and professionalism. Any deviation will be noted." Amara blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Of course, Mr. Jun-ho. I look forward to working together." Her tone was warm but firm, and she met his gaze evenly. The first task was simple on paper: review a series of reports and provide strategic insights. Yet the way Jun-ho scrutinized every detail, every word, was unnerving. He corrected formatting, questioned phrasing, and challenged assumptions she had taken as final. Amara, instead of shrinking back, leaned in. "I see your point, but consider this alternative approach," she said, presenting a perspective that Jun-ho had not considered. For a moment, silence filled the room. Jun-ho regarded her carefully, the sharpness of his gaze meeting her unwavering confidence. No one had dared challenge him like this before. "Interesting," he muttered, finally, a word so rarely used it carried weight. "Proceed with your suggestion, but note that efficiency remains non-negotiable." Amara nodded, hiding the thrill that her words had made an impact. Outside, the office seemed unchanged, but inside, a subtle shift had occurred, the first spark of intrigue. The hours passed with an almost theatrical tension. Amara's questions were probing but respectful, challenging assumptions while never undermining authority. Jun-ho found himself silently taking note of her quick thinking, the sharpness with which she navigated complex scenarios, and the way her eyes lit up when she solved a problem he had deemed impossible. Later, they walked through the office together, reviewing ongoing projects. The city stretched beyond the glass windows, a landscape of lights and motion. Amara, noticing a small Korean snack stand near the employee lounge, smiled. "I've never tried that before. Do you recommend it?" Jun-ho hesitated, unused to such informal curiosity from someone outside his inner circle. "It is acceptable," he replied tersely, though a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. At lunch, Amara suggested trying a traditional Korean dish. Jun-ho watched her as she navigated chopsticks with a mixture of focus and playful frustration. She laughed at her own mistakes, a sound so unguarded it made Jun-ho uncomfortable in an unfamiliar way. He realized he was paying more attention to her than he should. "Careful," he said, finally, not out of malice, but as a warning. "Precision matters." "I know," she said, looking up, eyes sparkling, "but some mistakes are worth it if they come with learning." The day drew on, and Amara's presence began to unsettle the monotony of his perfectly ordered life. The small moments, like the way she tilted her head, the way she smiled at a minor victory, the way she questioned without challenge, they all created a quiet storm in Junho's heart. He found himself recalling her words, her laughter, her energy, long after she had left the conference room. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in shades of orange and gold, their paths crossed again in the elevator. Silence filled the small space, but it was the kind of silence loaded with unspoken thoughts. Junho glanced at her profile, sharp features softened by the warm light. Amara caught his glance and smiled faintly, a mixture of respect and something else he could not name. By the time she left the building, the air around Junho felt different. The ordered, predictable world he had built seemed subtly shifted. He was aware, perhaps for the first time, that a force outside of schedules and rules had entered his life. Outside, Amara paused on the steps of the building, taking a deep breath. She felt a thrill of uncertainty and excitement. This man, cold and precise, intrigued her as much as he frustrated her. There was a spark, subtle yet undeniable, and she knew it would not be the last time they crossed paths. The first hour of their encounter ended with a quiet, simmering tension, a pull neither could resist, a beginning that promised both conflict and connection. In this structured city of steel and glass, two very different worlds had collided, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The morning sun spilled across the glass towers of Seoul, but inside Junho's office, the world remained calm, precise, and ordered. Amara arrived early, reviewing documents she had prepared the night before. Junho was already at his desk, focused, eyes scanning a report. "Good morning," she said, placing her notes on the table. "I reanalyzed the workflow. If we adjust the project steps slightly, we could improve efficiency by 15%. He looked up, eyebrow raised. "Explain." She pointed to charts, highlighting overlapping tasks. "By delegating these sections differently and prioritizing client-facing tasks, we can finish on time without compromising quality." Junho considered her words. 15% is ambitious. "I like ambitious," she replied with a soft smile. "It is achievable." "Proceed," he said finally, his tone neutral, but a quiet spark of curiosity flickered in his gaze. The day progressed with them working closely. She asked questions, offered alternatives, and corrected minor mistakes in his presentation style. Junho noticed her confidence and clarity. She spoke directly but respectfully, and for the first time in years, he found himself valuing another's insight as more than just professional input. Later, Amara suggested lunch at a small Korean restaurant near the office. He initially refused. "I bring food from home. It is more predictable," he said. "Sometimes unpredictability is good," she countered, leading the way. She explained each dish as they tasted it, laughter spilling into the quiet restaurant when he struggled with chopsticks. "You are too precise for someone tasting food for the first time," she teased. "Precision prevents mistakes," he said, almost smiling. As days passed, their interactions became routines. They walked through the city discussing work, life, and culture. She taught him the names of African spices. He showed her subtle cues in Korean etiquette. Each lesson was a small bridge connecting two worlds, and slowly they learned to appreciate each other's differences. Then came Yuna. She entered Junho's office one afternoon without announcement, claiming she was there to check on the project progress. Amara noticed her immediately, flawless, elegant, and with a gaze that lingered too long on Junho. Yuna had been a family friend for years, close enough to know his habits, his preferences, even his hidden smiles. But she harbored a secret, dangerous jealousy. She wanted Junho for herself. "Ah, Amara," Yuna said, smoothly, her voice polite but layered. "I see you've already met Junho. How are you finding Seoul so far?" "It is different," Amara replied cautiously, sensing the subtle tension. Yuna's eyes lingered on Junho. "Different can be exciting, but also challenging. I hope you are adjusting well to his standards." Amara nodded, polite but wary. She had sensed a slight edge in Yuna's tone, something unspoken yet hostile. Junho remained silent, busy with a file, unaware of the undercurrent forming in the room. Over the next few days, Yuna's presence became more frequent. She asked pointed questions about Amara's background and subtly hinted that Junho's attention could not be taken lightly. "I know how loyal he is to family," she said once, casting a glance at Amara, "and there are obligations that outsiders do not always understand." Amara began to feel tension she could not name. She noticed Yuno watching her, scrutinizing her every interaction with Junho. At times, it felt almost as if she were testing her, attempting to intimidate her without speaking overtly. Despite the tension, Amara refused to step back. She continued to contribute to the project, meeting challenges head-on. Yet each smile from Junho, each approving nod, seemed to fuel Yuna's quiet resentment. The subtle games began. Misinterpreted remarks, minor rumors whispered to colleagues, small seeds of doubt planted carefully. One afternoon, Amara stayed late to finish a report. Junho appeared at her desk unexpectedly. "You are working late," he observed. "Yes," she said, stacking papers. "It is easier to focus when the office is quiet." He nodded, leaning slightly closer. "You work well under pressure." Amara looked up, catching a warmth in his voice. "Thank you," she said softly. At that moment, Yuna appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of files. "I didn't expect anyone here," she said lightly, her eyes scanning the space. "Late nights can be lonely. You must be careful not to overextend yourself." Amara sensed the subtle warning behind Yuna's words, but she forced a smile. "I will be fine," she said firmly. Junho noticed the interaction, but remained silent, not wanting to cause a scene. Yet in the back of his mind, he began to sense Yuna's influence, a subtle tension he had ignored too long. Over the next week, small moments revealed Yuna's interference. She whispered to colleagues, suggesting Amara might not understand Korean work culture. She spread rumors about Junho being already committed, carefully planting seeds of doubt. Amara, though intelligent and confident, could feel a creeping unease. She began questioning her place in this office, wondering if she had misread his intentions. One evening, walking back from a late meeting, Amara asked, "Why does she always watch us?" Junho did not answer immediately. He stopped, looking at her with quiet intensity. "She is protective of certain things," he said carefully. "Do not let her influence you. Your place here is earned, not given." Amara nodded, though the doubts lingered. She realized that their growing connection was no longer simple. The bond forming between them was now under threat from forces she could not yet fully see. Yet, even with tension in the air, their moments together remained electric. During one project discussion, Amara noticed him glance at her as she presented a plan. "You are very confident," he said quietly. "I have to be," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Confidence makes people listen." He studied her silently, absorbing not just her words, but her presence, the way she carried herself with dignity and determination. "I am noticing," he said finally. For the next hour, their conversation continued, layered with work, culture, and unspoken acknowledgement of the connection building between them. Amara shared stories of her family. Junho listened, sharing bits of his past only when prompted. By the end of the day, the office was quiet, but the tension between Amara and Junho was clear. Their connection had grown with every shared glance and conversation. Amara arrived at the office early, her mind on the project she had flown to Seoul to complete. She barely knew Korea beyond what she had researched for work. Each day presented a new learning curve, but she remained focused on her tasks. She did not notice how Junho's team sometimes glanced at her, whispering about her being foreign, black, and different. Subtle stereotypes lingered in their observations, though they did not voice them openly to her face. Junho was at his desk when she entered. He glanced up briefly. "Have you completed the workflow updates?" "Yes," she said, stacking her notes neatly. "I analyzed the client feedback and reorganized the steps to meet the deadline efficiently." "Good. Efficiency remains critical," he said. For the next few hours, Amara worked quietly, unaware that Yuna had already arrived at the office earlier. Yuna had watched her from the moment she stepped into Junho's world. She understood the dynamics of his office and his habits far better than anyone. She knew exactly when and where he would be alone, which meetings he would attend, and the subtle signs that indicated his growing interest in Amara. Yuna approached Amara casually. "You're adjusting well," she said, her tone measured, "but sometimes appearances can be misleading." Amara looked up, frowning slightly. I am here to work. I do not follow appearances. Yuna smiled faintly. Of course, work is important, but there are other matters that require careful observation. Not everyone welcomes outsiders easily. Even within families, expectations can create obstacles. Amara nodded politely, not realizing the warning embedded in Yuna's words. Later, during a project review, Yuna slipped in small remarks about Junho. He is loyal to family. He is cautious with attachments. You must be careful about what you assume. She implied subtly that a serious relationship would face disapproval without specifying why. Amara's focus remained on the project, but the remarks planted doubt. Meanwhile, Junho remained unaware of Yuna's manipulations. He continued to treat Amara professionally, offering guidance and oversight, but he did not perceive Yuna's interference or the narratives she spun to make Amara question his intentions. Yuna began escalating her tactics. She spread stories to the office that Junho had private engagements, family expectations that could not accommodate a foreign partner, and rumors that his family would never approve of someone like Amara. She whispered that his attention could not be taken seriously, that relationships outside his culture were complicated and frowned upon. She carefully ensured that no one contradicted her, making the environment subtly hostile. One afternoon, Yuna cornered Amara near the conference room. I hope you understand that some things are private, she said, her voice calm but sharp. Junho's family has very specific expectations. Attachments outside of his culture are rarely accepted. It would be unwise to assume anything. Amara paused, considering her words. She had no idea about Junho's family stance or the subtleties Yuna implied. She nodded quietly. I understand, she said. As the days passed, Yuna's interference grew. She whispered to colleagues that Amara was unfamiliar with Korean customs, that her background made her an outsider in both professional and personal spheres, and that Junho's attention might be fleeting. She manipulated small office situations to make Amara feel excluded or under scrutiny. Junho continued unaware. He reviewed reports, oversaw meetings, and treated Amara with professional respect, not noticing the network of influence Yuna had created around them. He did not know that every small hesitation Amara showed, every moment she questioned his intentions, had been seeded by Yuna. Only Yuna knew the full extent of what was happening between them. She monitored their interactions, noted how Amara reacted to his guidance, and planned her next moves to maintain tension. Eventually, Amara confronted him indirectly. I don't want to assume anything, she said cautiously during a project discussion. I just want to do my work properly and not create problems. Junho looked at her, puzzled. What do you mean? You are doing your work well. I know, she said carefully, but some things, some expectations, I do not want to interfere with them. Junho did not understand her hesitation. He did not know about Yuna's whispers, the rumors, or the office's quiet judgments. Yuna, observing silently from her office, smiled faintly, satisfied that the subtle doubts had taken root. Amara withdrew slightly, focusing on tasks, attending meetings, and keeping interactions strictly professional. Junho continued to give her guidance and recognition, not unaware of the internal conflict she faced. The office's atmosphere had shifted without him noticing, tension carefully orchestrated by Yuna, who remained the only one fully aware of the invisible barriers she had created. By the end of the week, Amara worked efficiently but avoided unnecessary conversation. She measured every word and glance. Junho, still unaware, reviewed reports and considered her performance exceptional, yet he sensed a small distance he could not explain. Yuna's plan was unfolding exactly as she intended, the subtle manipulation complete, leaving Amara cautious, Junho oblivious, and the tension thick enough to lead to the inevitable confrontation. The tension reached a peak one afternoon during a project review. Amara had prepared a presentation and walked into the conference room only to find Junho waiting with the team. She tried to maintain focus, but every look he gave was filtered through the doubt Yuna had sown. I've prepared the updated workflow, Amara said, avoiding his gaze. Junho leaned forward. Good, let's review it together. I can present it myself, she replied curtly, her voice tight. I don't want to mislead anyone or assume anything about your personal situation. Junho froze. Amara, what are you talking about? She shook her head and turned toward the door. I'll handle it. I cannot risk causing problems. He rose, taking a step toward her. Problems? You don't understand. Talk to me. She did not. She walked out, leaving him standing in the conference room, confused and unsettled. Yuna, watching from the hallway, gave a subtle, satisfied smile. Only she knew the full extent of her manipulation. Junho had no idea why Amara was pulling away, only that the gap between them had suddenly grown. The office, once a place of professional collaboration, now felt charged with tension. The unseen barrier, created entirely by Yuna, was complete. Amara focused strictly on work, avoiding any personal interaction. Junho sensed the distance, but could not understand the cause. The stage was set for confrontation, revelation, and the eventual rebuilding of trust. Amara went back to her desk, the conference room empty after the presentation. The weight of unspoken words. Amara worked late, the office nearly empty. She noticed the silence more than usual. She caught herself remembering the way Junho checked her reports without speaking, how he placed documents on her desk instead of calling her over, how his concern was always quiet and controlled. She told herself it meant nothing. She reminded herself she came to Korea to work, not to misunderstand kindness. Still, the absence of his presence unsettled her. Junho sat alone in his office long after everyone had left. He reviewed numbers he already understood. His thoughts drifted to Amara's recent distance, her careful tone, the way she avoided his eyes. He realized he had grown used to her steadiness, her competence, her way of grounding the room. The awareness unsettled him. He dismissed it as distraction, yet the silence felt heavier than before. Neither spoke, neither acted. Both carried the weight quietly, restrained by pride, caution, and the fear of misreading what had never been said aloud. The shift began quietly. Junho noticed it during a routine briefing. A junior manager referenced a timeline Amara had revised, but the credit was attributed to Yuna. Amara did not correct it. She remained still, eyes on her notes, allowing the moment to pass. That silence stayed with him longer than the meeting itself. Later that day, Junho reviewed the internal correspondence. He noticed inconsistencies, messages redirected, clarifications delivered late, decisions framed in ways he had not approved. All of them passed through one channel before reaching Amara, Yuna. He called her into his office without explanation. You have been coordinating communication on this project, he said calmly. Why? She smiled, composed. You asked for support. I was only helping maintain balance. Between whom? He asked. She hesitated, only briefly. Between expectations, she replied. Your family's interests, the company's image. You cannot ignore how certain associations appear. He leaned back slightly. What associations? She met his gaze. Amara, she is capable, but you know how this looks. She is unfamiliar with our culture. Your parents would not approve. I assumed you understood that. He said nothing. The silence stretched. You assumed, he repeated. Yuna continued, confident. I protected you. I made sure boundaries were respected. I told her what she needed to hear before things became complicated. What did you tell her? He asked. She paused again, enough to keep her focused on work. The answer was incomplete. He recognized it immediately. That evening, Junho reviewed every exchange between Yuna and Amara. Patterns emerged, conversations framed as concern, advice delivered as warnings, implications without confirmation, control disguised as care. He understood then. Amara had not withdrawn without reason. She had been guided there. The next morning, he found her in the archive room reviewing reports. Amara, he said. She turned, guarded. "Is there an issue with the data?" "No," he replied. "There is an issue with the truth." She waited. "You were told things about me, about my family, about commitments, about what I can or cannot choose." Her expression remained neutral. "I did not ask for explanations." "I know," he said. "You were given conclusions." She closed the files slowly. "I came here to work, not to place myself in a position where I am inappropriate." "To whom?" he asked. She met his eyes for the first time in days. "To people who already decided I do not belong." The words landed without emotion. That was what unsettled him most. "I was not aware," he said, "but I am now." She nodded once. "That changes nothing." "It does," he replied. "It means the silence was not yours alone." She considered him for a moment, then returned to her work. The distance remained, but the control Yuna had held was no longer intact. The first crack had formed. The shift did not announce itself. It unfolded through process. Junho requested a full audit of the project's communication chain, not formally, quietly. He reviewed logs, timestamps, forwarded notes, and revised instructions. The pattern was consistent. Decisions he made reached Amara altered. Clarifications she requested were delayed or reframed. Every adjustment passed through Yuna. He did not confront her immediately. Instead, he invited his parents to a scheduled company dinner earlier than planned. Yuna was present, seated confidently, speaking as if she already belonged. When the discussion turned to the project, Yunho referenced Amara directly, praising her efficiency and accuracy. His mother listened without comment. His father asked a single question about her background. "She was hired for competence," Junho said. "Nothing else was considered." Yuna stiffened slightly. She had not expected that. The next day, Junho called a department meeting. He clarified reporting structures. Communication would now be direct. No intermediaries, no reinterpretations. He spoke calmly, but the message was precise. Authority was being reclaimed. Yuna approached him afterward. "You are overcorrecting," she said. "You know how this will be perceived." "I am correcting," he replied. "There is a difference." Later that evening, Junho received a direct message from Amara. Clear, unfiltered, professional. It was the first time in weeks that instructions reached her without distortion. She noticed immediately. The next morning, Yuna attempted to speak to Amara privately. She framed it as concern again, but the confidence was gone. Amara listened, then interrupted. "You speak as though you decide outcomes. You do not." Yuna said nothing. By midday, the narrative had shifted. Colleagues adjusted. Credit was reassigned. Small acknowledgments surfaced quietly. Nothing dramatic, but the environment changed. Junho stood at his office window that afternoon, watching Amara walk through the corridor without hesitation. The distance between them remained, but it was no longer enforced by silence or manipulation. Yuna, for the first time, was no longer in control.